Now, from Atlanta News First, the issues that matter to you. This is On the Record.
The historic 43-day partial government shutdown could be coming to an end. That is, if congressional Republicans do indeed bring to the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives a vote on a bipartisan, Senate-approved resolution to reopen the federal government, a vote that could come as soon as later today, Wednesday, November 12th, 2025. This is On the Record with Atlanta News First, joined as always by my friend and colleague and the host of On the Record with Atlanta News First, Rick Folbaum. I'm Tim Darnell. Rick, we have been following this shutdown since its very beginning. Our very first On the Record podcast back on October 1st, 2025, to coincide with the launch of the show On the Record with Atlanta News First was the very first day of the partial government shutdown. That was 43 days ago. Do we really see now, do we have a light at the end of the tunnel?
Well, it certainly looks that way. And just a shameless plug, On the Record, the television show is on Sunday mornings at 11. You can find that on our streaming platforms and, of course, on Atlanta News First as well. But back to your question about the light at the end of the tunnel. Yes, we do have a light at the end of the tunnel. That is because of Democrats who defected and really bucked the party line and party leadership and decided to vote in favor of this Senate resolution, giving Republicans the 60 votes that they needed in order to get this measure passed. We heard a lot of talk about the so-called nuclear option blowing up the filibuster rule, which has been in place for decades now. It's sort of a way to protect the minority interests in the U.S. Senate, and so by getting those Democrats to cross over and side with Republicans on this bill to end the shutdown, Republicans are sort of paving the way here for this bill now to go to the House of Representatives, as you said. And we know that the Speaker of the House has already asked all lawmakers, House lawmakers, to make their ways back to Washington. They've been in their districts. They haven't been working in weeks. He's asked them to come back to D.C. in anticipation of a vote, and we've already heard from President Trump that he will sign it once it gets to his desk. So there are some things that need to take place, but we are in the final days and hours of this historically long government shutdown.
Let's look at the Democrats who crossed the aisle. To be fair, to be accurate, we're looking at 7 Democrats and 1 independent who typically caucuses with the Democratic Party.
That's right.
Kane of Virginia, Shaheen of New Hampshire, Hassan of New Hampshire, Rosen, Nevada, Masto, Nevada, Fetterman, Pennsylvania, Durbin, Illinois, and Angus King, an independent from Maine who we said typically caucuses with the Democratic Party. I find it interesting that both U.S. senators from 2 of the bluest states in the nation, New Hampshire and Nevada, were of the 7 who crossed the aisle, and we're seeing a lot of blowback from the more progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Senator Ro Khanna of California coming out on Monday saying that Chuck Schumer, Senate Minority Leader, needs to be replaced. A lot of social media outrage. You can take that for whatever it's worth. But what are the long-term consequences facing the Democratic Party? Neither of Georgia's 2 U.S. senators, Ossoff or Warnock, were among those who crossed the aisle. The southernmost senator who did cross the aisle is Tim Kaine in Virginia.
Right. Tim Kaine, the former vice presidential nominee of the Democratic Party. Dick Durbin, who has been in party leadership for so many years. So we're not talking about sort of, some obscure group of Democrats, renegade Democrats who were deciding to do this. We're talking about really establishment members of the Democratic Party who had evidently decided that they had seen enough. Reports about delays at airports with Thanksgiving coming up. I think that probably spooked a lot of lawmakers in Washington. We heard that President Trump was really encouraging Republican leadership to get this done. He was sort of on the sidelines encouraging this. But I think that for the Democrats, there is reason to be disappointed, and there's reason for Democratic voters to be disappointed, and that's because this whole shutdown was, according to the Democrats, about health care subsidies, right. Obamacare subsidies that are set to expire at the end of the year, and when they do, people who buy their insurance on the marketplace, in the public marketplace, Obamacare marketplace, they're going to see their premiums, in some cases, double. So this is something that Democrats, this was their line in the sand, and then at the end of the day, they didn't get what they wanted, and this shutdown ends really without those subsidies being extended. What they did get, what they were able to extract from Republican leadership in the Senate was a promise to hold a vote in December on extending these subsidies. No guarantee, first of all, that it would pass in the Senate. Second of all, that Mike Johnson, the Republican Speaker of the House, would even bring this up. He hasn't made any such promises on any health care related bill. So a lot of Democrats are, I think, rightly upset that they didn't get what they said they were doing this for in the first place. I spoke with somebody who said, "Well, what is different now? They could have done this 43 days ago, and we could have avoided this entire debacle." So I think that there is there are a lot of unhappy Democrats, especially since last week's election results were so promising. Some people thought, as a result of all the Democratic victories last week, that it would embolden the Democrats to really hold firm and stand their ground. They didn't do that. So now we have a compromise bill that looks like it's about to pass that will fund the government through January and do a lot of other things that I'm sure some Democrats are very happy about, but doesn't do anything for the health care subsidies.
So all of this begs the question, what has been accomplished?
Right, and I think that that's what a lot of people are asking. If you look at some of the details that Democrats were able to get the Republicans to go along with, they were able to guarantee that all of those federal workers who were furloughed will get back pay. That all of those federal workers who were fired as a result of the shutdown will be getting their jobs back. We talked about the promise of holding a vote in the U.S. Senate on these health care subsidies, and that's really sort of those are the headlines from what the Democrats were able to extract. But really, there's not a whole lot that's different. Certainly not on the topic of health care.
Well, we will continue to watch today, Wednesday, November 12th, 2025, and going forward, if there is indeed a vote in Congress to end this historically long 43-day partial government shutdown. The other item that we're watching is that in a matter of hours, a deadline will have passed to have a new special prosecutor appointed for the continuing investigation and indictment of President Donald Trump and 18 of his Republican allies in the historic Georgia election interference case. On Friday, November 14th, I should say Friday, this coming Friday, November 14th is the deadline that Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee has given the Prosecuting Attorneys Council of Georgia a deadline to appoint a new special prosecutor. Now, this has all been precipitated by the fact that Fulton County District Attorney Bonnie Willis, who brought these historic indictments in August of 2023, has since been disqualified from further pursuing her prosecution of the case. That's due to her inappropriate, I'm paraphrasing, but has been ruled an inappropriate relationship with the former special prosecutor, Nathan Wade, that relationship being financial and romantic. On Monday, earlier this week, 48 hours ago, President Donald Trump pardoned all of the alleged alternate electors who allegedly played a role in attempting to certify the 2020 presidential election for the then incumbent 45th President of the United States. Rick, one of those pardoned, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones.
That's right.
Who was not named in Fulton County DA Bonnie Willis's criminal indictment. He was mentioned as an unindicted co-conspirator, but he was an alternate elector who did attempt to certify Georgia in the President Trump's category as a win in the aftermath of the 2020 election. These pardons that President Trump issued yesterday were only for federal charges. So despite the fact that all 18 of the individuals listed in Bonnie Willis's indictment are included in these pardons, the federal pardons really don't have anything to do with the case that we're now waiting to see if a special prosecutor is going to be appointed to.
That's right. These are really symbolic at this point, preemptive. I guess the president wanted to get out, in front of the potential of any federal charges, although to think that his own Justice Department would bring any kind of election interference charges against any of his allies, I think, is laughable. But you're right. I mean, the pardons that were issued by President Trump for these folks who were allegedly involved in trying to undermine the election results here in Georgia, really don't do anything as far as any kind of state or local charges that might be brought against them. They are still susceptible to those charges, should they be brought. I mean, we have President Trump delivering a bit of a gift in the pardons. We could see a really more important gift handed to these potential defendants if the prosecutorial counsel that you mentioned decides, rather than reassigning this case to a different prosecutor, throwing it out altogether. And that's one of their options, is to get rid of this case altogether. And that, of course, would be the ultimate pardon on the part of prosecutors here in the state of Georgia. You mentioned Burt Young. You called him an alternate juror. Let's be clear and not mince words. He was a alternate elector. He was a fake elector, and he was one of many who were assembled by the Trump campaign in an attempt to really subvert the election results here in Georgia back in 2020. These so-called alternate electors were going to apparently take the place of the duly elected electors and override the actual election results here, which, as we know right now, is a very narrow victory for Joe Biden. So we'll see. We have the pardon, but I think that the deadline coming up on Friday from the prosecutors and the prosecutorial counsel, I think, could be even better news for some of these defendants who are still sort of in a legal limbo here as this case winds its way through the court system.
Only a few hours after the news broke that President Trump has pardoned those alternate electors across the nation, not only here in Georgia, but across the U.S., Pete Scandalakis, who is the executive director of the Prosecuting Attorneys Council of Georgia, said he had been made aware of the pardons As everyone knows, these are RICO or racketeering charges that Fani Willis has brought against President Donald Trump and more than a dozen Georgia allies, and they really have no bearing on his case. He did say, and I'm paraphrasing, his counsel will continue to diligently pursue the case and fulfill all of its legal requirements and obligations that Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee, who is overseeing the case, has laid forward or has laid out. All of this is also coming ahead of a significant bit of news that we will be following on Thursday, when a special Georgia State Senate Committee on Investigations that has been looking into and impaneled to investigate Fani Willis's use and her conduct and her behavior during her prosecution of President Donald Trump will be having another meeting on Thursday, November 14th. Or I should say, Thursday, this coming Thursday, November 14th at 10 a.m. at the state capitol. So that is another issue that we will be following. It has been reported that Fulton County DA Fani Willis will not be appearing at that Senate Committee on Investigations, but has perhaps rescheduled her appearance. Rick, you mentioned Sundays, every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. on Atlanta News First. Give us a wrap-up of some of the issues that your show has covered, not only recently, but what's ahead on our agenda as we head into the holiday season.
Sure. Well, of course, we've been reporting on the elections that took place last Tuesday and the election results, trying to dissect that, figure out what that means, what those Democratic victories in the Public Service Commission races, 2 seats flipped from Republican to Democrat last week, and we also have a number of other races here that are still to be determined. We've got some city council races that are going to a runoff. We have the mayor of Sandy Springs race that is going to a runoff. South Fulton is having a mayoral runoff as well. So we're going to be talking about all of that and getting some analysis on all of those things moving forward. And of course, we'll talk about the politics of the shutdown.
And how long it will take for the federal government to fully get back up and running.
Right, and that's going to take a little while, and we know that there are people who are hurting in the meantime because of the disruptions at the airports, with SNAP benefits. All of those things have been impacted, and so we'll see how long it takes to get everything back up and running, and we'll also ask our panel exactly who they think politically won the shutdown, and whether the Democrats should be sort of slinking away, having lost the shutdown, or whether the fact that they made this such an issue, they sort of set the table for next year's midterms. When they can bring health care back up once again. It certainly is an issue that the Democrats have won on before and think that they can win on in the future.
A reminder to watch every edition of On the Record with Atlanta News First every Sunday at 11 a.m. on Atlanta News First, and also WANF TV, Channel 46. And also you can watch and listen to all of the On the Record podcast and every edition of OTR on our YouTube channel, as well as download wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you for watching ANF Plus. For more breaking news, live coverage, and your community stories, download the Atlanta News First app. You can also watch us on YouTube, Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. To join the conversation on YouTube Live, visit our channel and hit subscribe. You can also listen to the Atlanta News First podcast by searching Atlanta News First on your preferred listening platform.